Alrighty. Hope everyone enjoyed the lunch. We'll have another break in a little bit, but we're going to move on to our next session, introducing Saurabh Wadhwa and Raja Jasper here. You guys can go for a more thorough introduction through your slide deck.
Oh, thanks. Is that what's on there? Well, this is going to be completely different from what you guys been hearing, the last day or so. So I currently manage a security operations center at a financial institution, but been doing this for over 10 years. And so not doing just that and being on call 24/7, right? I teach part-time at University of Maryland, and also I brew beer on the weekends because, what's better than drinking your own beer? Go ahead.
So I am a senior solutions engineer at Uptycs. Been here a little over 2 years, and I come from a security background. I worked in the UBA space, threat intel, SIM, and XDR. And in my free time, I love watching USC football and spending time with my family.
So our presentations is just a little bit different, right? So just to lay it out there, we are not Osquery experts at all. Just learned it about 3 weeks ago. So we're gonna go at it, right? But pretty good at building detections, right? So if you look at what is an alert, right? It's essentially all these log lines that get generated and being sent out to your SOC, and your analysts are looking through all these log lines, so looking for needle within the haystack, and whether it's compliance logs or audit logs or settings, right? So we put out a log line that we're going to be using as our example, and it is from Osquery, where someone downloaded a piece of malware. And then what's the detection, right? It's behavior of like an alert, right? It's like rules that tell us like what's going on, right? What the analyst needs to look for. So in this sense, right, as our detection that we're writing is you're selecting the time and you're doing some script text within the PowerShell event. So our approach is like, going traditional versus non-traditional. So a lot of the smaller shops will go traditional, right? They'll take the IOCs, they'll put that in a detection, and they'll fire it off. Because it's pretty simple, right? Having IOC-based detections. It's easy to build, and it's easy to change. But over time, right, it makes it really tough to do that as your SOC grows. And you can't really base it on, like, if every single malware, you're going to look at all the IOCs and build it. But if you start looking at it on a different side, how do I change that, and how do I look for the behavior? So that's where we're introducing the non-traditional piece. So our non-traditional way that we're going about this is with MITRE. So we're looking at the MITRE framework. What is helpful for you? We're not looking at MITRE as a whole, because it might be different for me compared to what's different for you. And then we want to take the detections and we want to custom craft it. So based on the behavior of the detection. So each detection is telling you a story. So like PowerShell spawning Mishta, right? That will work across many different malware groups. So it's like if you craft the detections based on the behavior of it, then you'll have a greater advantage. And then, of course, using MITRE. So we used an example for like a ransomware. So we used Attack Navigator within GitHub. You can, go on there. You can check out MITRE here. So this is like more for like a healthcare side, and it's a ransomware. This ransomware will probably apply for most of the organizations. So you can see the recon. You can see the resource development. Where all it's hitting between the tactics and techniques. So we're gonna walk through this with the example with Osquery. Actually, Saurabh is gonna walk you through this. So our example, right, Emotet, which was already talked yesterday, we're gonna go a little bit deeper in it, right? Everyone knows that email comes in, you click on it. Of course, the person's gonna click on this document, and the document comes down, it spawns PowerShell, and it goes into registry. Auto keys, starts emulating, starts going out to C2 domains to collect the data, come back, and start propagating within the environment. So what does this look like within Osquery?
So in this case, we ran the malware sample on a Windows host, Windows 2019, right? And there were some challenges along the way. The funny thing is, we tested it using the latest version of Osquery, which is 5.4. And so in that case, FIM was not working, and even eventing framework. So I had to downgrade a version, and then I just started my testing. And we started with the most basic and one of the most important functionalities that Osquery offers, which is file integrity monitoring, right? And in this case, I just used a simple file path, which is C users administrator downloads, right? Typically, whenever you click on a document to download it, it goes into your downloads folder, like, unless something else is specified. So in this case, we're just looking for anything that gets downloaded into the downloads folder. And we see that someone downloaded a zipped file called virus.doc.zip into his download folder. And it's just a single FIM configuration that we used. And you can have multiple ones. You just have to put it in your configuration file, and it can start using those FIM packs. So this is the screenshot, like when the user double-clicked on the Word document, and like it's a multi-thread process, like it spawns different processes. And this is what happened when the user double-clicked on the malicious document. And these, like we can detect that if files get opened or someone changes like the ownership of the file, modifies a file, we can detect that using FIM. In this case, the user double-clicked on the .doc file, and this is what showed up using Osquery. So in Emotet example, right, the user double-clicked on the document, it spawned a PowerShell, which then dropped a process, and that process opened up a backdoor channel to a command and control IP address. Right? In this case, we are detecting all the processes along with the user who's running that process. Right? We see that svchost.exe is running as admin, right? And Raja can explore a little bit more on the svc host process.
Sure. So like usually, right, when SVC host is running, it's running based on, as the local NT account, or it's using the system account, right? It's not really running as admin till you run the application as admin, right? So if something's running as admin, right, you want to go and investigate within your endpoint itself.
So as I mentioned that, so in this case, the PowerShell dropped this process called IEAP-FLTR.exe, right? And we see that it's reaching out to an IP address, a remote address on over port 8080. And during our testing, it was funny that when we were refreshing the query again and again, so the remote address was changing, and it was like all over the world. Like we had Mexico, United States, Argentina, and we are looking for any remote process which is not over, where the remote port is not equal to 0. And we see that the process dropped by PowerShell is actually trying to communicate with the remote address over port 80. And we also have the MITRE ATT&CK mapping, right, where you can map the different techniques, the MITRE techniques to, the Windows, Windows
process.
Windows processes, yeah.
And the one more thing, if we go back here, right? So this query itself, you could take it and scale it out to all the endpoints, right? Because if you're looking at like SVC hosts, or you're looking at these other executables that are trying to reach out, these processes that are reaching out, you're like, why is this endpoint should not be reaching out to these IPs, right? If it's internal, it's fine, right? If it's going anywhere external, or even if your firewall is blocking 80, or even it's like filtering over 443, you should need to go and look into it. So what does this mean, using MITRE ATT&CK in Osquery? So, if I look at MITRE ATT&CK as brand new, right, it's like boiling the ocean. Like I can't go and look at every single aspect, and this is what I need to solve. I need to figure out my organization, what are the threats that I'm facing, and then how do I combine, my high false positive detections, and then what are the things that I care about? What are my crown jewels? So within Osquery, you can actually go map all your detections, so these queries, to MITRE ATT&CK. And then you can put them in configuration files, and then it will tie it back to the tactics and techniques. And each time you run them, it will be towards a technique. And then wherever you're sending the data, you can have that correlated as well. Before we go into the questions, we want to talk through some of the challenges that we had running this in Windows. I know like a lot of folks talked about like Linux, or they talked about Mac OS. And as we ran this through Windows, it was super challenging because we didn't really know what tables where the data sat. So it was like pretty hard to like figure that out unless you were sending it somewhere, because we're working natively within Osquery itself. And then of course the versions, so the brand new version for Windows, it didn't work. Like nothing worked in there. We just sat there and just we were troubleshooting and nothing worked, and then we had to like go back 2 versions, and then everything just magically started working. But that's all we got. Questions?
I know you said you had some challenges with Windows and the newer versions with running it. Did you have any issues installing it or anything like that? Did you have any problems operationally with Osquery and Windows at all?
Yeah, it was fine. Like installation was still fine, but yeah, like the surprising thing is the FIM wasn't working, and also the eventing framework. So it was a challenge.
You want to talk about the flags they use for the?
Did you guys set up a detection sandbox, I guess Cuckoo or whatever, to do this? And if so, do you have like the Ansible code available, or?
I just used a Windows 2019 VM on my just local host.
So nothing automated to set?
No, like I worked with Emotet before, did a forensic analysis on it, so like knew like where all the file paths were all existed within registry. So it was like just easy to just go and like look through all of it and like we know exactly what changes happened to it. Yep.
You mentioned the problem of boiling the seas, looking at all the tactics.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on using MITRE defend in order to prioritize defensive measures?
So in my current company, we started using the defend side now, but we all already start mapping everything to the tactics and techniques first, and then also like probably doing a gap analysis on the data that you're bringing in. I think that will help you out, but I think defend is like more newer, so we're gonna get there. Yep. I know it's not what you're looking for, but yeah. Yeah.
So you had, talking about boiling the ocean, and you said that first you want to look at, what are your critical log areas, and then the other criteria was what are the noisy alerts.
Yep, and also the threats that you're facing.
So like the combination of the two, that's why you picked like Emotet,
Yes.
The ransomware, because it would apply to other ransomware. Are there any other types of maybe use cases that are like coming next to help people to kind of understand what they might want to prioritize?
Yeah, so one of the challenges that I'm currently facing is you have all these server logs, and then you have all these NUIDs, so like non-user IDs or service accounts, and then they go and make these random changes, and then how do you, it's taking that plus machine learning and figuring out what changes are legitimate and what changes are not, because every change is going to look legitimate. So that's the next challenge that trying to face, and maybe leveraging Osquery to see if we can help with that.
Great. Thank you guys very much. That was outstanding. They were being a bit bashful. Saurabh's got plenty of Osquery experience, and Raja's a bastion of knowledge, as you can tell. So we'll take 5 minutes just to grab a quick coffee, water, bathroom break. You guys can connect with, you all can connect with these presenters, and then we'll roll into our final presentation of the day. It's extremely meaty. talking about containers, eBPF, and Osquery, potentially even enough for 2 presentations. So, and it'll be how we finish out our day before a final announcement regarding the After Dark party. So take a quick break. We'll get back to it. See you soon.